Yes, we are. Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to IITG Season Sister Speak. I'm your host, Victorianne Russell Walton. Our co host, Warren Green, will be here shortly. He's actually getting the vaccine in the Hampton Roads area. I tell everybody to each his own, and you do what needs to be done for your households and for you to be safe. I am listening to today. God is working miracles, devotion service Sunday morning. You ought to turn it on. And I tell people to get your shout on because let me tell you, I don't know who backs you up, but I know who backs me up every morning. And if you don't want your new grace and joy, I'll take it. I'll take everybody's favor that I can get my hands on. This is my part right here, so I'm gonna go ahead and shut it down before I have to get up and do my little Mashonda dance. I don't think y'all ready for my Mashonda dance yet, but I'm excited. So today we are having an adult conversation. And what does that mean? We're going to have an adult conversation about what's going on in our community. And I'm so thankful that Dr. Lorenzo Neal has agreed to be our guest today. And it was short notice, so I'm very thankful that he was available. I wanted to talk about business, but you know what? There's two things that everybody's talking about: the vaccine, COVID 19, and business. I want to talk about issues that we need to address that we're ignoring. And that is what's going on in the community: mass shootings, black on black crime. Does Black Lives Matter? Yes. But does it matter when we're shooting each other? Does it matter when, Day Day is running down the street with an AKA and he's just killed, a 1 year old, a 2 year old in the back seat? Yes, we want to stop the police crime and the police shootings in our community, but it's much more than that. We can't keep saying Black Lives Matter. Oh, but hold it. Not when it comes if David Day shoots, or not if it comes if it's Kiki shooting or fighting or stabbing. Just yesterday, I believe it was, no, the day before yesterday, four shootings. This guy shot four people, Pastor, in the house over the stimulus check.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Stimulus check. You're not going to get the stimulus check now. You weren't going to get the stimulus check before. And now four lives have been lost, including the young man, because of a stimulus check. So we have a lot to cover. Again, I'm Victorianne Russell Walton. This is IITG Season Sister Speak. And we're going to have an adult conversation today about shootings and surviving shootings and Dr. Lorenzo Neal. So let's jump into it. We're going to thank our sponsors in a little bit. But Dr. Lorenzo Neal is a coach, a gun violence prevention advocate, pastor, and an expert in self differentiation. He's going to explain that to you. But I want you, again, everybody, to listen in, tune in, tell your mom and them, tell everybody. That we're about to have a conversation, an adult conversation. So this may not be for younger children, so you may want to usher them out, but it's definitely for those who need to hear this that may be going to left field. Dr. Lorenzo Neal, thank you for agreeing to be on IITG Season Sister Speak.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor. I appreciate it.
Please tell us all about you, and I want to jump right in this. Why? What happened that made you say, okay, you know what, enough. Let's go.
Well, first, I am a pastor. I'm the pastor of the New Bethel African Episcopal Church in Jackson, Mississippi. And
Mm-hmm.
I identify as a survivor of gun violence. I'm a senior survivor fellow with every time Gun Safety Survivor Network. And in that role, I travel and share the story of how I've been personally impacted by gun violence. So my story of being personally impacted by gun violence is this. In 1980, my 25-year-old mother, Sharon Neal, was killed in an act of domestic violence that involved a gun. She was the mother of four boys, including myself and my three other siblings, one who is deceased. Uh, and mind you, she was only 25 years old. And
Wow.
someone decided that her life was not as valuable, and they uh, he took her life. We were raised, my brothers and I were raised by her parents as their own children. So I was raised by my grandparents, and it took me a while to make that adjustment.
I could imagine.
To, to know that my grandparents were not my parents.
Right.
um,
Wow.
so we lived that way for a long time, raised by her parents, and we didn't really have any trauma uh, because of her death.
Hmm.
We were not traumatized directly as some people are. They have that traumatic event and
Right.
changes the rest of their lives. Fortunately for
Yeah.
my brothers and I, because of the nurturing of family and a lot of community and the
Mhm.
village, we
Yeah.
were to grow and do well. So that was my first incident of gun violence. And in 2015, after the shootings at Mother Emanuel AME Church in there in Charleston, South Carolina, my
Hmm.
colleague, the Reverend Pinckney, and 8 of his parishioners were killed. And that's how I initially got involved with the gun violence prevention movement as part of the AME Church's response to that. We decided that we were going to take gun violence prevention as a mantle uh, to help bring greater awareness. And of course, correlated alongside the rise or the birth of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Right.
And so I got involved with that and was doing the work as I began to really help, as, as I identified as a survivor of gun violence, been personally impacted. So I
Hmm.
was doing the work and trying to help people understand the correlation between domestic violence, gun violence, and as you were saying earlier, black on black crime,
Hmm.
black on black homicide, and more specific.
Yes.
And then in October uh, 2016, my 18-year-old nephew, Kevin Neal Jr., was killed in a senseless act of gun violence in Newport News, Virginia.
Oh, Newport
And
News.
I was doing the work, and it, it devastated me.
Wow.
And so I felt even more obligated to not just share the story of my mom, but to share the story of many other persons like
Mm.
my nephew, my brother and sister, and many other families who have the stories of their loved ones being taken out by one of our own.
Right.
And those stories don't make the national news.
Nope.
Those stories do make local news, but they're often just uh, made to be out just as another crime.
Yeah.
And both the victims and the victims' families are largely ignored if they can be a part of a greater narrative,
Right.
promote a greater whatever agenda. So, part of my role as a senior fellow, I put the faces behind the statistics
Hmm. Okay.
to help people realize that every incident of gun violence, whether it's fatal or non-fatal, has an impact on the entire community. It's a physical impact that's involved. There's an emotional impact that's involved.
Hmm.
And there's a societal impact that's involved. And the more we put the faces and the stories to the public so they can see a different narrative, the
Yeah.
more hope as gun violence prevention advocates to change the way violence is perceived, gun violence is perceived.
Hmm.
And if we can change the way gun violence is perceived, we can hopefully alter the way people behave that would in turn cause an end. Or if we can't end it, it definitely decrease the likelihood of gun violence in our communities.
So, Doctor, how do you see us doing that? What are the steps that we need to take? Because we've had the marches, we wear the t-shirts, we put the signs up, I've even seen people, I mean, with the bumper stickers. What is it gonna take?
Well, there's a multifaceted approach that we have to do, and it has to be a collective approach. largely it's been disconnected. We have the legislative advocacy that is disconnected from the community advocacy, that is disconnected from the faith community advocacy, if there is any within the faith community.
Right.
And there's also a greater disconnect from polity and policy. We have to draw a connection to all of those. And um, once we do that, we have a greater chance of helping people see that gun violence, particularly black on black homicide and gun violence, is not just a negative headline for us,
Mm-hmm.
but a greater impairment to the overall holistic existence as us as a black community in the more general sense.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, part of us what we need to do, we have, you know, I'm grateful for the Black Lives Matter movement, the
Right.
global movement that has mobilized a lot of young persons and got them interested into at least one facet of this, which is uh, the law enforcement and crimes against uh, Black Americans in that capacity. That's a wonderful thing, but we also have to concentrate on the crimes within our community that we have the code of silence on. You know, so when
Yes.
Pookie and Ray Ray commit a crime and we're aware that they committed a crime and we stay silent because we don't want them to go to jail and becoming a statistic. You
Right.
know, we do more
Right.
harm. And then there's the definitely as a pastor, there's the faith community component. And I believe that's the weakest part of this connection. For in many communities, the church, especially black communities, many black communities, the church was the epicenter of community life. It revolved around it. People scheduled their work and their world around the church, and that is not the case um, any longer. And we've
Hmm.
got to convince faith leaders, pastors, all those persons who claim to be clergy, all of that. We have to convince them that their voice is just as potent within this sphere of communication as it is behind the pulpit or within the sphere of evangelism. If we want people to really have abundant life that Jesus speaks about in John 10:10, then this should be a part of that because there's no way we can have abundant life in communities where people fear.
Wow.
You
That's
understand?
that is so important that you said that because with me since the pandemic, my sister who's like you, a Bible scholar, we've been talking a lot and with some other pastors. And to me it was like, well, this is the time when you put up a tent and you have a Holy Ghost revival, to heal the people. This is not the time to talk about, and I know the church needs funding, but it's not the time to talk about funding. It's not the time to talk about prosperity. Although a lot of us are hurting, we also know a lot of us are dying. And we don't hear the talks about how to get to heaven and how to stay out of hell. I hear more conversations about coins than I do about heaven and hell. And nobody's really touching on that. And no one is also talking about the crime in the community. You do not hear that at all. And I've listened to an array. There's like 10% of pastors that will touch on this subject. And it's like, are the pastors afraid? Are the pastors just overwhelmed? Because pastors are human too. But I also know that there's a responsibility that you have to our community, especially with, hi, Jennifer, especially with being the cornerstone of the community. Where is that push from the pastor to say, okay, look, we're taking the streets back, Day? We're not doing this no more. This is it. This is over. What's going on?
I think, and this is just from my perspective.
Of course.
Uh, I have the fortune to be able to live and serve where I pastor. I live in the community where I pastor, and I live. My church is in the urban community. It's a historic community, the community where civil rights leader Medgar Evers lived
Mm-hmm.
and served. So, but it's also a very or a poor community,
Mhm.
and there's economic strife. As a pastor who lives in that community, I'm able to walk around the community. That's what I do. You know, people know me because they know my dog. My dog and I, we walk around our community. You know,
Okay.
that's what we do,
Mhm.
and that's my mode of evangelism. You know, they see me walking my dog. They have fun talking with him, interacting with him, and
Mhm.
and they realize, oh, you're the pastor of that church, or
Yeah.
hey, you that preacher. That's like, yeah.
Mhm.
I don't even invite them to the church. It's just about engaging them. You know, not
Right.
because that's so much as trying to get them to come to the church or anything like that. It's just helping me be aware of who are the people that I serve that may not be within my four walls,
Right.
but it's part of the greater community that I am called to serve in this present age. So I think that's another disconnect. You know, we have a lot of churches that may have started in urban communities, but then, you know, they grow and they move out, or they build sprawling buildings, and people feel that, and it's a shame that some people feel this way, that if a church builds a new building, they're not really able to come because they may not have the money to come.
Right.
Uh, and as churches, just like as people, when they leave the communities, if they have a house that they leave the community and then they leave it in the hands of someone else who doesn't care, then the likelihood of the person who doesn't care allowing the property to maintain its elegance, its beauty, and its worth decreases. And it's the same
Right.
thing with the church. Uh, the more we become produce a product for people to consume, and they consume that product, and we grow, and we say, well, we can't stay here anymore, and we move out. Well, in essence, we leave a void because we don't usually maintain a connection to the place that may have where we may have come from.
Right.
And when you leave that void, it is causing so much that could happen. um and and it leaves that sense of isolation for those persons who are there, who feel left behind, or those persons who are there who feel out of touch, or
Yeah.
out of, what's the word I'm looking for, they don't feel quaint enough to be a part of that place.
Wow.
We
Wow.
have to get back engaged to the centers of our urban communities, where the ministry really is relevant, but the presence is even more relevant.
Wow. Okay. All right. We're going to get into it today. And I see Warren has joined us. Dr. Lorenzo Neal, let me introduce you to Warren Green. Warren Green is the co host of IITG, and he's
Glad to meet
also
you.
an expert in his field. Um, Let me put this plug in. We don't have the best weather up here in the DMV area. So you may, well, we just did. We may experience problems as we just did. We lost signals. So it's all good. We'll just restart. But you're listening to IITG Season Sisters Speak. I'm your co host, Victorianne Walton with Warren Green. And today our special guest is Dr. Lorenzo Neal. And we are talking about gun violence. And he is an advocate against gun violence. And he is also a pastor down there in Mississippi. And I thank him again for being a part of our show. For those of you who we just lost signal to, I apologize, but it says it'll pop back up on. I'm not for sure which one that is because there's 8 different locations that we're on right now. Hello, Jennifer. Hello, everyone in South Africa. Hello, everyone in Japan. Konnichiwa and bonjour. Um, we want to thank all that are listening, and we are, again, let the babies leave out because we're going to have an adult conversation. And a lot of this, we are going to talk about black on black crime and murder and how we can try to resolve this. Of course, we can't resolve it in an hour, but let's talk about it, because it doesn't seem to be getting better. You know, I always say, how in the world did Day Day get an AKA in our community? Because they don't make them over here, and you can't just go to the store and get them. So where are all these guns coming from?
Uh, that's a good question.
Where
um,
the bullets coming from? Hollow points? You
mm,
can't even get those. Where are you getting hollow points from?
mm.
you know. And I look up, and I'm from Virginia Beach, Virginia. Warren is down in the Hampton Roads area. And my mother used to always say there's not going to be anybody left alive in Portsmouth, the shootings that they have, you know. And unfortunately it's not just one shooting. It's a shooting here, it's a shooting there, it's murder here, and they're babies. It's bad enough when it's adults shooting at each other, but the babies, 1 year old, 2 year old, 5 year old. I mean, my heart hurts. And now we're shooting over stimulus checks. Before then, we were shooting over Popeye's chicken. I mean, when does the common sense come in? Where's the disconnect that we're not saying, okay, look, enough is enough. Big Mama used to walk down the street and snatch him up by the back of their collar. You can't do that anymore because Day Day will turn around and there's no respect there. So when did we lose the respect, and how can we get it back? How can we let these babies know that there's a bright side, and if they just hold on for a better day, it gets better?
That's an interesting a whole lot of a whole lot in that.
Was sorry.
No, 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 no. Uh, you know, we just had a shooting of a 13-year kid recent. Matter of fact, just this weekend, 13-year-old was shot and killed by a 20-year-old,
Uh,
and it's what it really entails is a lack of emotional intelligence, emotional control,
mm,
and community. When you talked about Big Mama, now I had my mama. I lived with my Big Mama.
yeah.
I knew my great grandparents, and
Hmm.
I lived in a neighborhood uh, in my hometown in Louisiana, where literally every parent on the street, on the block, was your parent.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Uh-oh. Uh-uh. Dr. Neal, you're freezing. I
Can
know
you hear
that.
me okay?
I can hear you okay. Dr.
Okay.
Neal is frozen.
can you hear me now?
I can hear you're coming back in. I know the weather is not the best down in there. Nope. Dr. Neal is frozen. But we're going to remind ourselves he's down there where all the tornadoes are hitting, and he's down in there. So we got to say a prayer and touch and agree that he's okay. But he's going to come back in. But while we're waiting on him to come back in, Warren, let me ask you this. Because Warren is an expert on a lot of things, but I think he can answer this question. Do you think it's the food that affects the mindset mentally for some of these people who are having, issues? And we lost him, so he's got to dial back in.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
I mean, of course it is. But
Hmm.
I'm a cause and effect person.
Right.
That's what I believe in is cause and effect. And I
Hmm.
think it goes all the way back. I think it goes all the way back to when our community had leverage and now we don't. The only leverage we have is the vote.
Yeah.
We actually used to grow our own food. We don't do that anymore. We don't do anything. Everything that we have has to be given to us. So we don't have any leverage. So when you get down to that level, of course there's going to be violence.
Right.
How could there not be violence? When you
Right.
have no, what are the options? When we had our own businesses before World War One or after World War one in every seven farmers every was black.
Yeah.
Now it's like 1 in 1,000. So we don't even grow our own food. We have to beg people to feed us. In fact,
Yeah.
now the country has to import anything, enough food for us to eat. So it's going to get worse. The problems have to get worse. So some of the people, and we know who they are, will put weapons there well, they expect the violence. I mean, I believe that this our society is dialed into genocide anyway. They know the demographics of who's getting the vaccine. They know who's not who. They know which neighborhoods they are. They easily know which neighborhoods are have the most infections and so forth. They have that technology.
Right.
Or every community has a water treatment center. They have labs in there. They know where the disease is. They know who gets the who. They know who's going to get the vaccines. They know. and it wasn't a surprise to me that all of a sudden we weren't getting them in the neighborhoods that should have.
Yeah.
Wasn't surprising to me.
Right.
Even
And
your
that
doctor didn't get his supply.
right. Yeah, exactly. And then here we go again. We're number one for all these health disparities, and we're number one for these issues. So Dr. Neal is back, and thank you so much. I know you're down there in Mississippi. Let me just shout out how Tam, how hi Jennifer, hello IG social media, hi everybody, hi Brandon, how I don't know. Okay, some of you guys are using your nicknames. I'm not gonna shout you out because she said I'm at work, but I'm listening to you. All right, sis, thank you so much. We're not gonna shout out who you are, but Tammy said our dad had an awesome garden when we were young, and we grew up very healthy. Yeah, Daddy had a great healthy garden, and he taught us as well. But that leads us to this question and this statement. Warren, you made a great point. We are sometimes in need of so much that we can't see the sunshine in spite of. So here comes Day Day. You know, it goes back to the when we were having the sneaker murders. You got those Jordans. I want those Jordans. Take them off. I'm not going to take them off. Boom, boom. Now you got a pair of bloody Jordans. Everybody know where you got them from. You know, nobody's going to snitch on you because they're afraid of you not taking my shoes, but of you murdering me. So here we go. Don't snitch, don't tell. But because there was a void and there was a need that wasn't met, here comes the murder. So it's like a full cycle, right, Dr. Neal? It's a full cycle, right?
Yes, that's right. And Mr. Warren, you brought up a couple of things. I think they're very essential in the South where I live, and especially here in Mississippi, which is largely rural, but we still have urban pockets. But even in the urban area where I live, in the capital city, Jackson, Mississippi, we still have food deserts.
Yeah.
Um, and the grocery stores that provide the healthiest of food
Hmm.
are further away, and
Yeah.
of course, a little more costly.
Right.
Um, the other thing is the grocery stores that are located within those communities are they're the lower quality food.
Yeah.
The food that people are ingesting aren't as healthy,
Of course.
No.
and but at least they can say that they have a food. There's a grocery market there. I did a talk a few years ago at a local NAACP banquet, and I discussed on how the dollar stores, those dollar stores, Family Dollar, Dollar
Hmm.
General, and what's the other one? Dollar.
Dollar Tree.
Those stores are becoming the grocery mart
Grocery stores. Yeah.
for a lot of urban communities, and so
Hmm.
they're getting under nutrition food,
Right.
and that counts. And I'm a guilty of it myself because I run the Family Dollar. It's just up the street, and
Right.
if I want something real quick, I'll go there instead of
Right.
going to Kroger's or going to Whole Foods or going somewhere else where the quality of food is better. And I'm going to pay $2 for this versus $4 for this.
Right.
Well, isn't
Uh,
it interesting? Isn't it interesting that prior to that, after World War II, even we grew our own food. We had our own. We had black people part of the national food chain, the food distribution chain. We grew our own food. That we even had vendors come into our neighborhoods to bring fresh fruits and
Yeah, we
produce.
did.
So the USDA, and I retired from the USDA, they measure a food desert by the by how many stores, the grocery store.
Right.
Why should a commercial institution be the measure of a food desert anyway? And in fact, why shouldn't, to in my opinion, every church in that area ought to have a victory garden. Everyone should have a victory garden. All these kids, they should know how to grow food. That ought to be part of their education, is how to grow food, and what to do with the soil. We don't have kids don't even want to be farmers no more. That's how we got to eat. How I don't see how as a culture, we even have a chance if we don't get a handle on our nutrition.
Right.
Just like you said, the food, the Dollar Trees, you is no way. That's not even. I call that fake food. It's not even food. It's not nutrition, or it doesn't provide any nutrition that you could use. You always these people go in there or obese, they're everything, and then how is that handled? And our government knows, so we can't depend upon them to try to resolve the problem.
Right.
They're not going to be the ones. It has to be up. So if we only have an institution, the only institution that we have is the clergy, which is great. That's where it has to start. That's how our farmers. That's how our whole infrastructure has to be developed.
Right.
Well,
But Warren, look at Dr. Neal.
thing-
He's got this big smile on his face. So it seems like you're in agreement to that, Dr. Neal.
yes. Here's what I want to point out. See, I grew up. My grandparents and my great grandparents, they lived side by side. They had a garden
Right.
in the yard in the urban community, and I hated having to go and pick
Same
the
here.
okra. We picked the okra, the cucumbers,
Yeah. Same
uh,
here.
the
Potatoes,
apples,
apples,
and all of
sweet
that.
potatoes, watermelon.
Until I got older, and then I was in the college, and I realized, oh, I could go home, and I know I'm gonna have, I could pick me something.
Some
Uh,
good food, fresh food.
yes, but here's the thing about that.
Mhm.
Part of the problem that we have in urban communities with gardens is we have to shift some blame to our legislators, and I'm talking about local legislators, municipal government, who now
Right, Tammy.
is trying to and boost economy. They'll do zoning ordinances that will not allow for gardening your yard, and even if you have the means to upkeep it yourself, you have to go through all kind of hurdles
Wow.
for many cases to get that done in urban centers. Now,
Mhm.
um, in more rural communities, you know, it's seen as, I know here in Mississippi where we have quite a few black farmers who
Mhm.
contribute regularly to the Mississippi economy. For a great deal of them, it's pride, but for some of their children or their grandchildren, it's like there's nothing for me. Is They don't see the value in the ownership of the land. They don't see the value
Right.
in maintenance of the land. They don't see how it will really build wealth.
Benefit. Right.
Well,
Warren speaks about that wealth all the time. He tells you if you
that
have
behavior is
dirt, you
taught.
got money.
We lost our leverage. In fact, a very good friend of mine, Perry Davis, is from Jackson, Mississippi. He was the regional director for the USDA down there. We went to school together and everything else, so I know him very well. And he just passed away from cancer. But this happened because the politicians are the culprits. Absolutely. I mean, from all the way down from Brown versus Board of Education, which was insidious. They took us out of our culture. How are our kids supposed to learn what they have to do to survive when all of a sudden they're bused to another region, another area, and taught by someone from another culture?
Yeah.
How is it
Yeah, they are,
possible that it
Tammy.
could be okay? That was a horrible law. Yeah, I thought even the civil rights law is horrible law. Period. Because we were entitled to the rights anyway. So why do we need a law defining us as second class citizens? It made no sense. We were already. I'm a veteran and everything else. Everything that I had to do, I've already done to be a full citizen. Why should I be defined by a civil rights bill saying, okay, you have the right? I already had the right to vote. So now the politicians, that's what they have to attack. That's what they have to do. I guess they want to be politicians so they can call the rules. So the lobbyists will come to them and say, well, we want to put uh, arsenic in the chicken feed so that it'll kill parasites. Well, some parts of a population can't handle arsenic. Some parts of our population can't handle glyphosate or Roundup. Most parts of our population can't handle dairy, can't
Right.
handle it. Our bodies can't process it. but they push it on us, and we actually pay taxes for that. It's amazing. So we know it's not going to be the government that's going to protect us.
No, and that's again where the conversation comes back to you, Dr. Neal. Again, the church, the cornerstone. I remember the meetings at the church as a child. That was a place you went to discuss how are we going to handle this? What are we going to do? How are we going to fix it? How do we get the people involved? And then, they came up with a plan and they went and they told the people and they did something about it. And now it seems like we're not lost, but the push, the oomph is not there. And Tammy just made a great point to your comment, Warren. The Amish is way ahead of us. I shop at the Amish market. I love it. It's fresh food to me, and but to me, when you eat bad food, it affects your mind. You eat too much sugar, it affects your mind. You put our babies on ADH, it affects your mind. But again, all of the fights came from the church. And at least that was my memory. It came when you had a problem. You went to pastor and you told pastor. The pastor would try to hash it out. And I don't see that anymore. You have to make an appointment, which I get. Pastors are busy, and then you got to go through the armor bearers, and then you've got to tell the secretary what you want, and then by the time they get back to you 7 months later, you forgot why you called them. And now we're seeing Big Mama can't be buried at the church. That's the latest thing. Big Mama sold chicken and fried fish and made rolls and sold cakes. And she can't even be buried at the church because she's been in hospice for 6 months not paying tithes. And now we come back to the church and she can't be buried at the church. So to me, I'm just trying to understand, how do we get back to not you being our savior, pastor, doctor, I'm sorry, because you're not, but us coming to you to solve the issues. Where do we connect at?
Well, to address that, prior to, um, I say prior to 1965, um, and following that time, pastors lived in the communities that they served
Yeah.
for the most part. The church provided their housing, and if they weren't compensated financially, the church gave them food.
Right.
The church would oftentimes make sure if they didn't have a car, if the members didn't have a car, the pastor had a vehicle.
Right.
You know, and that was that sense of trust that this
Mm-hmm.
person that we are giving this care to will in turn give care to us.
Right.
That again, in the postmodern age that we live in, the church has, as an institution as a whole, has lost that sense of justice, has lost that sense of community, has lost that sense of empowerment and liberation. Um, so, as we're good as houses of worship, that's about all most of them are good for right now. Just a
Mm-hmm.
place where people can come and have a worship or religious experience. Outside of that, many of them are disengaged from the community. So part of has to be getting returning to that sense of community. There's no direct formula I can give as to say that what will happen, but because you have a large majority of young people, millennials and Gen X, Gen Zers,
Yeah.
who do not church, the institution of the
Yeah.
church. They
Yeah.
they grew up seeing, you know, pulpit pimps, if I could use
Mm.
that. Like
You can.
they grew up seeing that, and they saw that the preacher isn't worth anything. The preacher isn't better because the preacher is the lifestyle that they live. They're driving expensive cars. Mind you, I drive a nice vehicle myself, so I
Yeah.
can't. That's
And
just
there's nothing wrong with that.
nothing wrong with that. But if you're going
But
to live,
don't have me
you're going to live
selling
in a
fish
million.
to buy you an airplane.
If you're going to live in $1 million house, if you're going to have a car that's more than the average salary of your congregants, and by that I mean if it's going to be $100,000 more, um, and if you are not going to be able to interact with the people you're serving, supposedly serving and shepherding, then the people are not going to trust you, and they're not going to turn to you for issues like uh, this, which is what we saw at the
Yeah.
as the Black Lives Matter movement began uh, in the early stages of 2012, after Trayvon Martin in 2014, after Michael Brown Jr. and so forth. We could go down the list, uh,
Yes.
pantheon of those persons. Um, what we saw were people not turning to the institution of the church,
Mm-hmm.
but grassroots efforts. Not even along with, they weren't even inviting the church in until afterwards.
No, right.
And the church was really engaged was, if they had the funeral at the church, at the
Exactly.
to the church, and the pastor could say this, or they could, those public officials and luminaries could speak from the pulpit of the church. They would bring recognition that, hey,
Right.
the church is, uh, do that. Now, in the case of in Florissant, and and after Mike Brown, I say Florissant because we have churches in that area, and that's the general area that it happened. Um,
Well, the church could be. I'm sorry.
the churches were mobilized, and
They could be a significant force in this whole thing,
yeah,
and considering, and in fact they should be, because that's why they are 501c3. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why, and should be in their bylaws what they're going to do and what they should be held to what they're going to do. The church used to be in the community, and as far as law enforcement, they got away from what law enforcement really was. When I grew up, and I'm a pre-baby boomer. My father was a cop killed in the line of duty, as a matter of fact, in Indiana. But I grew up in New York, and there they practiced community policing, where the cop knew everybody in the block. The cop knew who was doing what, and so forth
Mm-hmm.
and so on, in my urban area in the South Bronx.
Right.
And so we had the hoodlums and stuff. They wouldn't even come in the neighborhood because the cop knew. So
Right.
where they garden, or where they choked them out. Well, these guys don't even know the neighborhood. They don't know the culture. They don't know anything about what the neighbor is. They're in there as occupiers, which they are. So they got rid of, for the economy. They got rid of community policing. They don't have to do that anymore. They got rid of, they systemically stopped the black farmer from farming. They actually had laws, or had practices in the USDA where they wouldn't, a farmer's whole income is probably borrowed for the next crop. They got rid
Right.
of that because they just deferred all of their loan applications to the bottom of the pack. So these farmers couldn't get their resources, or grants or anything from the USDA, so they couldn't grow. They missed 2 or 3 growing seasons. They're out of business. They
They
lose
are.
their land and everything, and then they go into the people who want the land went into industrial farming. We're going to grow for everything. So what do they grow? They grow corn and soy for the Chinese.
But Warren, that goes right back to the disparities in the community,
Oh,
right,
well,
Pastor? It
sure.
goes right back in the needs. It goes right back in why we're upset. It goes right back in, if your child hasn't eaten in 2 or 3 days, and as a parent, you you don't know what to do, and you don't have any money, and you can't go to the food bank, or you won't go to the food bank for whatever reason, then you're looking at, okay, I don't have anything but the underground to turn to. I'm going to get this gun. I'm going to go and get my baby something to eat, or I'm going to get this gun. I'm going to get my children some
Well, there you
Christmas.
go.
I'm going to get this gun.
So,
I'm going to go and I'm going to break into cars, and I'm going to get what they have so I can sell and get what I
so you
have.
know the answer. You know the answer because you know the problem. You've identified the problem.
I've identified the problem, but the problem is still there, Dr. Neal. How do we fix? I know we can't fix this right now.
It's to
What are the
understand the
steps
problem.
that we take? We do. So what are the steps that we're going to take? But before we answer that, I cannot believe it's 1:40 already. I've not done a commercial. Hold on a second. This is Victorianne Russell Walton with IITG Seasoned Sisters Speak. Today, our special guest is Dr. Lorenzo Neal, and we also have our co-host Warren Green. We are discussing violence in our community. Dr. Neal is an expert in coming in and trying to resolve this, working with other organizations. I'm going to also do a sidebar and tell Dr. Neal I'm coming. I want to start a cancer support ministry. I'm a two-time cancer survivor, and I'm trying to sprout up these cancer support ministries. So our numbers have tripled since we've been home during the pandemic. They're writing about it in every health journal. Blacks and Latinos, our numbers have tripled when it comes to breast cancer. So I'm going to talk to you about that side offline about that. But a couple of shout outs. We have the Virginia Beach Breast Cancer Foundation. They are having an event where they are sponsoring those that want to attend their virtual summit. So reach out to the Virginia Beach Virginia Breast Cancer Foundation. Let me hold that up there and I'll put that on my website. Again, sponsorships for the summit. I know I'm applying. And then also we have an awesome opportunity. So there is a young lady who's writing a book, Complicated Alliance. And this is Black Girl Stroke Magic. She wants to hear from those who have had a stroke. She's writing a book and she would like to interview you. If you've had a stroke, if you would like to be a part of this movement, please reach out to her. I will put her information on my Facebook page. Her name is Tamika, and I'm excited about what she's doing. Tamika Quinn. And you can also reach out to her at Team Dream Givers. I always want to make sure I say that right. And my last plug, love, love, love. I know Warren is going to love this. This is the African American Vegan Starter Guide. This book has a lot of great recipes, vegan style cooking, pancakes, how to transition, tips for eating out, what to eat, what not to eat, how to get your children started, how to exercise. And Warren, guess what? How to grow your own garden. I know you're going to love this page, Warren, but these are free to the community. They mail them out. And again, it is the African American Guide, Starter Guide to a Vegan Lifestyle. And listen, just because I'm saying right now, African American, this is for, yes, this is for everyone. This is especially for us because these are questions that we asked that were answered. But this is for anyone who's interested in starting a vegan lifestyle. And if your organization or church would like to order some of these, let us know and we'll give you the information. But great resource. I just sent some of these out. And again, it has everything in this book. So if you want to get started, you have questions you want to share in your next ministry or meeting, this is a great source. Again, Victorianne Russell Walton with IITG Seasoned Sisters Speak. We are talking about violence in the community. And I know we're not going to resolve this right now, this moment, and this hour, but it's definitely a conversation we need to have. And I also align that with having food deserts. When you're hungry, you're angry. When you're hungry, you can't think straight. When you're hungry, these babies go to school and they can't concentrate. And instead of putting them on medicine for ADHD, why don't you ask them if they're hungry? And because we all know these side effects of these medicines. And you know, when they turn 18, they're instantly taken off. So that's another psychosis that they have to deal with. There are a lot of steps to what's going on in our community. But Dr. Neal, I can't believe we have 20 minutes left and we're going to stretch this thing out. The last question was, how can emotional intelligence help clergy better serve their congregants? That is for you, sir.
Uh, Thank you. My doctoral research is in the area of differentiation of self. Differentiation of self is a concept developed by Dr. Murray Bowen, who came up with the family systems theory approach.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, you're fine. Keep going.
He came up with the family systems theory approach to family counseling, and he developed 8 concepts of his theory, and one of the eight concepts is differentiation of self.
Mm-hmm.
A differentiation of self is, in a the very simplest way that I can put it, is having an emotional intelligence of yourself, being able to understand your emotions, process those emotions as you're experiencing them, and be able to react less negatively. Uh, that's the goal. And in doing so, you have a better interpersonal skills and interpersonal relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a pastor, I wanted to explore that with clergy, because clergy spend so much time pouring out, and a lot of the times they are not well emotionally intelligent, and so because of that, they may make very poor decisions that
Yeah.
infringe upon the worship experience and the sometimes even the spiritual relationship of the individual to the church and to the Lord. So, uh, as a counselor and therapist, one of the things I do when I work with clergy in particular is help them explore that their emotional intelligence, help them be more aware of how do they react to
Mm-hmm.
themselves that may cause them to negatively react to others, and in doing so, it helps them be more aware of how they can be mature spiritually, emotionally, and then help their congregations to do so. And I believe this is a great contributor to um, to having better interpersonal skills. A lot of the reason we're seeing a violence in our community, and not just gun violence, but domestic violence, is because there is very poor interpersonal skills. We don't
Uh-huh.
that to our young people. We don't really properly teach them how to interact. How young boys should interact with girls, or how girls should interact with boys, or how we should interact with each other,
That's right.
and how
That's right.
children should interact. And there's a psychosis that comes along with that that can continue generationally, and that's what we see a lot of times. You know, you see family trauma that goes two and three generations straight,
Yeah.
and clergy are oftentimes unequipped to address that because they themselves are part of the trauma. They're part of they're part of it. They contribute
Mm-hmm.
to it, sometimes unintentionally, unknowingly, but a lot of times it's because they themselves are experiencing that same drama and they have not been able to address it themselves. So
Wow.
by getting clergy to understand self differentiation, be able to have wonderful interpersonal relationships, but they also understand that their connection to those relationships does not have to be fused. And that's a concept we call fusion with others, that they can differentiate themselves and their emotions as they're experiencing them, especially in moments of anger, anxiety,
Yeah.
distress. As
Yeah.
they experience those emotions, they can process them and react in a way that will be positive instead of negative.
Right. You know, I've often said that, and I'm going to speak on the woman's side, but I'm focusing on the men because we hear so much crime, but women have these fights and they shoot and they murder. But, for the Jewish, they have the bar mitzvah. That's when you know you've turned
Yes.
into, you've had a man. For the, Latinos, they have their celebrations. African Americans don't have a celebration of turning from a boy to a man. I've seen it in South Africa, I've seen it in other cultures, but we don't. And I said, wouldn't it be great for us to have some type of celebration for the females and men when they are turning into adulthood? They don't have that. One guy told me, when I turned 18, my mama put me out. I was out in the streets. I had to rob. I didn't have anywhere to go. She told me to figure it out. And it's like, what? You can't just put him out and tell him to figure it out. What do you expect him to do if he's not going to college or into the military? If he has no job, he didn't know how to wash clothes. He didn't know how to cook. You didn't teach him the steps to be successful, but you pushed him out and said, go figure it out. And then when he ended up in jail, you're like, how did he end up in jail? He was so smart because you kicked him out. So, twofold question: how do we prepare them for this journey if they're not college bound? Because every child is not for college, right?
Yes. Now, and
Do
that's the
we
thing.
go
That's
ahead?
That's an excellent thing that you point up, bring out. One of the things that I've been doing and partnering with several other pastors locally and regionally is developing rites of passage for African American boys.
Love it.
Um,
Love it.
that's very strategic and it's
Mm-hmm.
very intentional and strategic. We deal with very for example, one of the things that we're revamping it. Hopefully, we can launch it again. But at my church, we did a cotillion, or well, a botillion for the young boys of the church, the young men of the church, where we put, they went through a week intensive with the men of the church, mentoring them, helping them understand basic skills and stuff like that. Just spending time with them
Awesome.
after that week intensive. We trained, we prepared them to come out, and
Right.
we put on a formal ball for them, a former gala where they wore their tuxedos and they were escorted by some of the young ladies from the church, and they were presented before the congregation as such. This is the young man, master this, master that.
Wow.
And so we did that, and it was a way, it made them feel good. And mind you,
I bet so.
that went from the children as young as 12 all the way up to 17, 18. And
Wow.
Yeah, my
so,
brother has a program like that. My brother's a minister in Indianapolis, and they have a boot camp.
yes,
And they just did from the same ages from
Yeah.
12 to about 18. My brother's a retired corrections officer, so he came out of the prison system, and he now teaches and tutors through that. So they do a boot camp. It's kind of harsh. It's early in the morning. They get up before, if they have work, they get up before work, and they learn some of the things that they have to do. But I think it all boils down to the fact that you got to learn how to eat. If somebody's hungry, nothing works. You have to, we have to turn it around to try
Right.
to develop the skills that we need to survive in this world, and it has to include agriculture. What we consume has to include it.
yes,
And that it's a
absolutely.
full circle, isn't it? One it's a domino effect. One affects the other, affects the other, affects the other. Because you're right, if you're hungry, you can't concentrate. And I think everybody has had a situation where they've been hungry or just they've been backed up in the wall in a certain in a situation where they did not see any help. That's why we have these high rates of suicides that we're not talking about in our community. That's why we have these high rates of murders in our community. But and we all know it goes all hand in hand. So I love the programs. When I hear positive programs that are teaching young people what the next steps should be, we love it. Because look, Big Mama is out of the church. She's gone home to glory. Big
Hmm.
Mama used to snatch us up and say, look, you know better than that. And you could always go and talk to them, or they would come and talk to you. Look, girl, I saw you doing such and such. Cut it out. And you could have that conversation. We don't have those conversations anymore. One guy told me, I can go in the streets and talk to my homeboy in the corner better than I can talk to my dad. Well, a homeboy in the corner trying to get you to sell stuff, your dad is trying to teach you the right way. So you have this pull, let me go and talk to my homeboy about it. Or if the father's not there for the daughter and the son, who do they turn to? Especially when you feel like you're being judged by the pastor, or the pastor doesn't understand. And also, we've been home for a year. We these babies, they don't want to go back in that building. They want to stay on bedside Baptist.
Yes,
And again, you're not making them go to Sunday school, or you're not making them go into these classrooms where they're learning. And the food programs that the church did have, that's not there anymore. And that was another way of getting them to come through the door so we can talk to them. So it's again the domino effect. We're missing out on so much and so many great opportunities to reach the youth before the streets get them. The streets are claiming our babies at alarming numbers. Health disparities are claiming our people at alarming numbers. And Pastor, I'm not putting this all on you. And I thank you again for coming to talk to us, but make me understand what our steps should be. if there's no programs like yours in the community, YMCA is closing down, the boys clubs are closing down. You know, the money's not going to be there. We're in a pandemic. These babies are hungry. They're home being abused. They're home being beaten. They're home. You know, my girlfriend left me. I'm going to go over there and kill her and her entire family. What in the world?
Yeah, and that's very important. Um, and as I stated before, gun violence impacts the entirety of our community existence.
Yeah.
Um, and when we don't address it as clergy or directly, when we don't address it, even circumvently, when we don't address it, it comes back to bite us.
It
So
does.
we have to have, again, there are a lot of churches that have a lot of programs,
Mm-hmm.
and those are great programs. And then there are the smaller churches that feel that they can't do anything because they don't have the
Right.
resource. And this is where we have to really be critical because, you know, if, for example, within a 1 mile radius of my church, there are 13 other churches. Um,
Wow.
I
Wow.
as much as I can, I partner with some of these churches around my church. Whenever they're doing something, I'm going to help them. We may send a seed to them because we're like, well, we're not going to try to duplicate it. They're already doing it. Let's send them some
Right.
funds to make
Why
sure.
reinvent the wheel? Don't
Yeah,
reinvent the wheel.
yeah, and the same thing. When it comes to community violence, one of the things that in Jackson, I've been fortunate to have a lot of pastors who are passionate about it as I am. And, you
Mm-hmm.
know, they're put on rallies. Some I can attend, some I can't attend. But promoting these rallies and promoting these venues and these vigils for remembrance of those who have lost their lives through acts of violence, not just gun violence, but suicide by gun,
Yeah.
not just suicide, but also domestic violence, which is increasing
Huge. Yes.
in in all that. But it also, as much as I don't like, think people are comfortable in the church talking about this, within the broader scope of the Black existence, the LGBTQ community that's been impacted by domestic and gun violence, also,
Right.
um, um, though we are addressed the opioid crisis in the country,
Whew.
there's a drug crisis in our communities that
Yeah.
are mollies and perks and all this stuff that
Ecstasy.
the kids are taking for fun,
Right.
you know, and all those contribute. It's a big thing. And some of the steps that I would say, one is get pastors engaged by
Mm.
helping them to see the value of their ministry as part of this conversation.
Yes.
uh, as long as pastors think that their ministry is what they preach and not what they do per
Mm-hmm.
se,
Mm-hmm.
they'll never be engaged in the conversation on violence. The second thing is I have to reconnect the church to the community, and that's the big uphill struggle as more people lose faith in the institution of the church
Yeah.
because some have been hurt in the church. Some see the actions of the people in the church and say,
Mm-hmm.
well, I don't want to be a part of institution like this because of the people in it. And some see the wealth of the church that is rapidly growing and saying,
Mm-hmm.
well, the church is not supposed to be rich. The preacher's not supposed to be rich or anything like that. So I don't want to be in anything to do with that. So we have to reconnect the church, the institution of the church, rebuild, reconnect trust in the institution to help again to be that voice again, that
Yeah.
voice of liberation and that voice of empowerment
Mm-hmm.
regarding violence of all kinds, particularly gun violence in this sense. And lastly, we have to get politically engaged, um, because if we don't get politically engaged, and I'm not talking about on the national level, the United States Congress just passed some sweeping gun legislation, but it has to be at the local level. You need to know your city councils, and get them, as we're talking about food deserts and things of this nature, where they are the ones who do the ordinances, right? They're the ones that try to secure all this stuff, And, but we just got to be politically educated. We have to be politically empowered
Mm-hmm.
because if our city council don't pass legislation or ordinances about guns, then in Mississippi we're an open carry state pretty much, and
So if you go all the way back to, if you go all the way back to like Brown versus Board of Education, look how that destroyed that whole concept. Because now you're taking kids out of their neighborhood to another neighborhood where they have no, where where they don't see the community, where that community is fine where they're being bused to, but they're coming back to something where that's it doesn't have any power at all. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what happened. So it was a bad law, so that would have to be fixed. But instead of it being condemned, I mean, they destroyed the black college. Instead of it being condemned, they actually celebrate laws that worked against them. It made no
Right.
sense.
yeah, I hate that we sometimes vote it out against our own
I mean,
self-interest.
how
Yeah.
could anybody in I'm assuming that you were raised in the South. You were raised in the South. What did Brown versus Board? What did you think of that? I mean, how was
Now,
that beneficial?
is that was bust too,
Yeah.
even
Yeah,
though
it
I,
wasn't. How was it been? You
yeah,
stayed. You were in your neighborhood. Your teachers were your neighbors. You had to learn.
and the other
Right.
consequence of the Brown versus education, my home state is Louisiana. Even in as late as 2010, 2015, we still had about 2 dozen school districts that were directly segregated, that were in violation of the federal laws. They were intentionally in violation. The other issue of that, again, I'm a proud graduate of a HBCU, and
Mm-hmm.
I grew up around HBCUs. Um, we tricked our own selves to believing that going to a PWI institution, or predominantly white institution, was better than going to HBCU. And most of the people who have been afforded opportunities, and I went to HBCU, and it was a wonderful learning experience, if you know
Yeah.
what I mean.
Uh-huh.
But we again in the
I'm
church.
a Tuskegee alumni, so
Bless
I understand.
the church has to again become part of that conversation. I'm Methodist. We own several schools, including uh, Mo- uh, Morris Brown College, uh, Edward Waters College. We own seminaries. One I graduated from a black seminary.
Wow.
Um, so we have to get back to that sense. And yes, to a degree, I think that there's some disruption in our sense of community. We bought into the idea that just by integrating things will be better for us. But having been a former educator myself, and I taught at two predominantly black schools, right? And in both of those predominantly black schools, the scores, it was both were Title I schools, both were underperforming and all of that. And at the school that I taught that was predominantly white, well, we self-segregated in that the students self-segregated. So the church has to, the black church collectively has to be the voice to say that we see this happening,
Mm-hmm.
we know this is happening, and we want this to change. And
Mm-hmm.
we have to be vocal advocates, political advocates, and change agents to make sure that this happens. And when they see us as pastors leading in the charge in
Right.
that matter, that the trust will be rebuilt in the institution of the church and the community of the church, and that can likely lead to the change that we want to see.
Awesome. I cannot believe, I mean, our hour is up. That went by so fast, and we didn't get to any of the questions. I'm sorry, everyone, but you can always reach out to us and we'll try to get an answer for you. There's no way we can resolve an issue in an hour. This, it's been going on for years. It's just like gaining weight. It took you a while to pick it up, so it's going to take you a while to take it off. But I appreciate Dr. Neal coming on and Warren. Dr. Neal, I'm going to give you a minute to tell the people whatever you need to tell them. Tell them how to get in contact with you. Tell them what you're doing to support you. Let's hear from Dr. Neal.
Thank you. If anyone would like to support me, I appreciate it. You can visit my website, lorenzotneal.com, and read up about me and articles that I there. as well as a couple of books that I've authored that you can purchase if you like. I also host a podcast called Be Your Differentiated Self. You can listen to that on the my website, and I host a show called Zero Today. And all of that is on my website, LorenzoTneal.com.
Mm-hmm.
Go there. And if they'd like to contact me, they can email me, Pastor Lorenzo Neal at gmail.com. And if they have any questions, and they I'm all over the place on social media. So they can find me on all social media: Twitter, Lorenzo T Neal, Facebook, Lorenzo Neal, and Dr. Lorenzo Neal. The two separate pages there.
Okay.
And wherever else the scope of life is, I may be there in some.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to connect with you on that breast cancer ministry. So but look out for that email. I will definitely be sending that over to you. That is definitely my heart's calling of trying to get information into the community for that. So we thank you so much. Warren, I'm going to give you a minute to tell the people what you need to tell them for today.
Well, you can reach me through Vicky, probably. I'm kind of winding down. I'm 81 years old, and life is
Wow.
kind of, yeah, I'm a
He's
pre-baby
not
boomer.
winding down. He's not winding.
So I'm winding down now, and I'm doing, I write a column for the Christian Broadcasting Company's
Mm-hmm.
Voice Connect newsletter. I
Mm-hmm.
do write that. And I'm doing little odds and ends and doing some Zoom classes and stuff. Like I said, I'm winding down. I'm trying to just stay on this side of the ground.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, and speaking of Zoom classes, we have our Zoom class this Saturday. Um, IITG virtual wellness classes that we're educating about chronic diseases, diabetes, hypertension, obesity, cancer, de-stressing, anxiety, and COVID. So we're having these health classes on Saturdays, just an hour and a half, 11 to 12:30. Let us know if you're interested in joining the class. We get started um, again in May for the next set of classes. So we have two more left for this session. So you can always reach me at 301-683-8690 or here on Facebook or on IG or Twitter. It's in the Genes 12, Victorianne Russell Walton. My telephone number has been the same for the past 20 years. So people know how to find me if they need to find me. So again, we are talking with Dr. Lorenzo Neal. He was our special guest today, and I'm so honored to have had him because this was a conversation that we needed to have. And it's uncomfortable for some, but it's needed. If we don't start having these adult conversations in our community, who's going to talk about it? Who's going to do something? People are often yelling, somebody needs to do something. Well, that someone is you. You do something. That's my motto. Do something. Stop screaming. Stop looking for Superman to come flying into the community. Superman does not exist. So we have to come together and make our power stronger by leaning on each other. Dr. Neal mentioned it takes a village to take care of the children, and it does. My son is surrounded by a village who loves him, who cares for him, and who watch out for him just as much as I do it. And I love that. We've got to get back to that. Big Mama is gone, but her spirit is still here. And she also, and Dad, Big Papa, they taught us what to do. So we can't get away from that. We've got to get back to it. What we really need is love. What we really need is understanding. What we really need is to pray for each other. Stop putting it on Facebook. You drop off food, nobody needs to know. The song says, I must tell Jesus. So tell him. Not Facebook, not Twitter, not IG. Just tell Jesus. Your reward is in your crown, not in your social media. Okay, that's my word for today. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Thank everybody. We had an awesome audience today. I see a lot of shares up there. Thank you, IG, Twitter, YouTube. I'm going to forget something. Facebook, Talk Blog. Thank you, everybody. And again, thank you to our special guest, Dr. Lorenzo Neal. I look forward to connecting with him and Warren Green, my backup as always. We're going to take over again on Saturday. So, Pastor Dr. Neal, be safe. We know the weather down there is not the greatest. So we're praying God covering for you and your community.
Thank you very much.
Let us know if we can support you in any way. So we're over time, but it was an awesome conversation that needed to happen. Again, we didn't get to a lot of your questions. I apologize, but I think we covered a lot. As Dr. Lorenzo and Neal said, and Warren, a lot of this stems from food. You're angry when you're hungry, and you make bad
Everything,
decisions when you're hungry.
everything stems from food.
If I may,
Everything.
Yes,
if
please.
if you're not aware, here in Jackson, Mississippi, we've been experiencing a water crisis that stems from poor infrastructure that goes decades back. If any of your listeners would like, we still need or need a bottled water, even though we have water restored, it's still not drinkable. So
Wow,
we will welcome any donations of bottled water to help us
bottled
assist
water.
the community. So
Oh,
I just wanted to say that that's something we're doing, and we're going to be needing for a long time.
isn't that something, Warren? You've got Warren shaking that head.
Well, it's
My
sad. I
husband,
mean, they even during World War II, they used lead plumbing in most municipalities. So it was like Flint. That was they kicked the can down the road. Things that are happening were not Johnson and Johnson. They're the that's the
yeah,
baby powder people.
yeah,
They were
yeah.
putting
Is it arsenic?
not arsenic.
Carcinogenics.
They were putting
Carcinogenics in there.
yeah, in the baby powder.
Yeah,
They knew that
they knew.
they knew there was going to be a day of reckoning,
Right.
and now they're
They did.
making vaccines.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I don't want it. I
Well, I
don't want
mean,
it.
but
Yeah.
they're
We
almost
could
you
go
almost
Warren.
have to because if you're not going to correct your food because they don't have a lot of COVID deaths
No.
in Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa has fewer deaths than New York State. Sub-Saharan 43 countries have
Yeah.
fewer deaths than New York State. And you can
Exactly.
include in Sub-Saharan Africa, Jamaica and all the Caribbean. And
Right.
all of them together have fewer deaths than New York State.
And you know that we talk about the food deserts and Dr. Lorenzo Neal, I will pull up there your information and that bottled water is needed. And hopefully the companies that have stopped making sodas can continue to support those that are still in need. We're going to have a need for a very long time. This pandemic isn't over by a long shot and people are still hurting. And, the weather is not helping. So we will definitely put it up on our website that you are in need of help. And, as they say, from our mouth to God's ears, He'll provide. So thank you very much for everyone tuning in to IITG Season Sister Speak. I'm Victorianne Russell Walton, special guest again, Dr. Lorenzo Neal, and cohort, my man, Warren Green. I appreciate everyone tuning in. If you have any questions, please inbox me and I'll try to get an answer to you as soon as I possibly can. But in the meantime, be kind to each other, wear your mask, wash your hands, and remember, if someone is in need, help them. Not social media wise, help them personally. Okay. All right. Everybody be
Nice
blessed.
meeting
Take
you,
care.
doctor.
thank you.
Nice
God bless.
meeting you, Doctor, as well. Awesome talk show. Thank you.